Her kindness to a man in need sets off a chain of events. He's a CEO who introduces her to a world of opportunities and perhaps love. And if you cherish your family and love videos like this, subscribe to our channel to have 10 years of luck in your life. The rain pounded against the windows of Seoul's bustling business district as Minho rushed into the nearest cafe, his expensive suit already dampened by the downpour. The small coffee shop was packed with others seeking shelter, creating a humid atmosphere of wet clothes and steamy windows. Minho checked his watch. He was already running late for his next meeting, but the weather left him with no choice but to wait it out. The line moved slowly as customers ordered their drinks. Minho pulled out his phone, scrolling through emails while he waited. The shop's warm lighting created a cozy atmosphere, contrasting with the gloomy weather outside. When it was finally his turn, he ordered an Americano, his standard choice for stressful workdays. As Minho turned away from the counter with his coffee in hand, someone bumped into his elbow. The hot liquid splashed across his white shirt and onto a woman's cream-colored blouse. The coffee created a growing brown stain across both their clothes. Minho froze, mortified by the accident. "I'm so sorry," he said, reaching for the napkin dispenser. His hands fumbled with the papers, dropping several on the floor. The woman bent down to help him pick them up, and to his surprise, she was laughing. "Don't worry about it," she said, dabbing at her blouse with a napkin. "I was planning to change anyway." Her smile was genuine, lacking the forced politeness he usually encountered in his corporate world. She had an artistic air about her, wearing a loosely fitted blouse tucked into high-waisted pants, with several rings adorning her fingers. Minho grabbed more napkins, still apologizing. "Please, let me pay for your dry cleaning. It's the least I can do." He reached for his wallet, but she waved him off. "Really, it's fine. Sometimes the universe just wants us to slow down, right?" She gestured to the rain outside. "Like today, everyone's rushing around, but the weather's forcing us to take a break." Minho found himself relaxing despite the embarrassing situation. "I suppose you're right, though my next meeting might disagree with that philosophy." You're one of those always busy corporate types," she said, but her tone was teasing rather than judgmental. She pulled a small sketchbook from her bag and began dabbing it dry. Some coffee had splashed onto its pages. "Are you an artist?" Minho asked, noticing the detailed sketches visible on the pages. "Something like that," she replied vaguely, closing the book before he could get a better look.
"I'm Seungmi."
"Minho," he responded, surprising himself by not adding his usual title or company name. The rain continued to drum against the windows, creating a peaceful backdrop to their conversation. They found themselves sharing a small table near the window, both waiting for the rain to subside. Seungmi told him about her favorite rainy day activities, sketching in cafes, visiting museums, or simply watching movies at home. Minho shared how he usually worked through weather like this, rarely taking time to appreciate it. "That sounds lonely," she commented, stirring her replacement coffee that Minho had insisted on buying her. The observation caught him off guard. People in his circle rarely spoke so directly about personal matters. Her honesty was refreshing, making him realize how much of his life was spent maintaining appearances. As they talked, Minho found himself drawn to her authentic nature. She laughed freely, spoke her mind, and seemed completely comfortable in her own skin, qualities rarely found in his corporate world of careful words and calculated actions. When she mentioned enjoying art exhibitions, his interest peaked, but she quickly changed the subject, Maintai, ning an air of mystery about her professional life. The rain eventually slowed to a drizzle, and both realized they needed to leave. Minho felt an unexpected reluctance to end their conversation. There was something intriguing about Seungmi, her creative energy, her genuine demeanor, and the way she seemed to live in a completely different world from his own. As they prepared to part ways, Minho watched her gather her things, noting how she carefully protected her sketchbook. He wondered about the drawings inside and what they might reveal about her. The coffee stain on his shirt had long since dried, but he found himself grateful for the accident that led to this unexpected encounter. 2 weeks after the cafe incident, Minho stood in his office overlooking Seoul's skyline, reviewing the final details for an upcoming fashion industry event his company was sponsoring. As the lead coordinator, he needed to ensure everything was perfect: the venue, the guest list, the presentations. His mind kept drifting back to the creative woman from the cafe, and an idea began to form. After several attempts, he managed to track down Seungmi through the cafe's regular customers. Making a bold decision, he visited during her usual sketching time. She looked up from her sketchbook, surprised to see him again. "I have a proposition for you," Minho said, sitting down across from her. "My company is hosting a major fashion event next week. Given your artistic background, I thought you might be interested in attending." Seungmi's expression shifted, a mix of excitement and hesitation crossing her face. She closed her sketchbook carefully, buying time before responding. "What kind of event is it?" "It's in Showcase for emerging designers. Several major fashion houses will be there, along with industry critics and potential investors." Minho watched her reaction carefully. "I noticed your sketches last time. They looked like fashion designs." Seungmi bit her lip, considering his words. "They are," she admitted finally. "I'm trying to break into the industry, but it's complicated." "This could be your opportunity," Minho pressed, sliding the invitation across the table. "The event includes a section where new designers can display their work. There's still one opening left." Her hands trembled slightly as she picked up the elegant invitation. "This is a huge event," she said, reading the details. "These are names I've only dreamed of meeting. Will you come?" Minho asked, trying to keep his voice professional despite his personal interest in her answer. After what felt like an eternity, Seungmi nodded. "Yes, but..." She paused, meeting his eyes. "I need to know, why are you doing this for me?" Minho hadn't expected the direct question. "Because talent deserves a chance," he said finally. "And your sketches showed real promise." The week leading up to the event was a whirlwind of preparation. Minho coordinated with Seungmi to secure her display space and arranged for her designs to be properly showcased. She worked tirelessly, finishing pieces and preparing her presentation. The night of the event arrived, transforming a luxury hotel's grand ballroom into a showcase of fashion and design. Minho arrived early, overseeing final arrangements while anxiously watching the entrance for Seungmi. When she finally appeared, Minho barely recognized her. Gone was the casual artist from the cafe. In her place stood a confident designer in an elegant black dress of her own creation. Her portfolio case clutched tightly in her hands, she made her way through the growing crowd to find him. "This is incredible," she whispered, taking in the elaborate displays and famous faces. "I can't believe I'm actually here." Minho guided her to her designated area, where her designs were already being arranged by event staff. Her collection, a modern take on traditional Korean elements, stood out among the other displays. As guests began to circulate, SEU. Ingmi's nervous energy transformed into passionate enthusiasm as she discussed her work with interested observers. From his position across the room, Minho watched with growing pride as more and more people gathered around her display. Industry veterans who usually showed little interest in newcomers were actively engaging with her, examining her designs closely and taking notes. The highlight came when Park Ji-won, a legendary designer known for mentoring new talent, spent nearly 20 minutes discussing techniques with Seungmi. Minho couldn't hear their conversation, but Seungmi's glowing expression told him everything he needed to know. As the event wound down, Seungmi sought him out, her eyes bright with excitement. "I can't thank you enough," she said, clutching several business cards from potential contacts. "This changes everything." "You did this," Minho replied, gesturing to the admiring glances still being cast at her display. "Your talent spoke for itself." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the last guests depart. Finally, Seungmi turned to him with a mischievous smile. "You know, spilling that coffee might have been the best thing that ever happened to me." Minho felt a warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with the champagne being served. He watched her return to her display to begin packing up, already fielding questions from lingering industry professionals. He had given her an opportunity, but she had seized it and made it her own. Something told him this was just the beginning. Following her successful debut at the fashion event, Sungmi secured a position as a junior designer at Lee and Park, one of Seoul's most prestigious ateliers. On her first day, she arrived early, her portfolio tucked under her arm and her heart racing with anticipation. The atelier occupied the top floor of a sleek building in Gangnam, its glass walls offering panoramic views of the city. A young woman with short, dyed hair and multiple ear piercings greeted her at the reception desk. "You must be Sungmi. I'm Jiyoon, senior assistant designer." She stood up, revealing a stylishly unconventional outfit that somehow worked perfectly. "I'll be showing you around." As they walked through the studio, Jiyoon pointed out the different work areas, the fabric library, and the production room. Other designers were already at their stations, sketching or working with fabrics. "Don't let the fancy setting intimidate you," Jiyoon said, noticing Sungmi's nervous glances. "Everyone here started exactly where you are." They reached a small desk near the window, Sungmi's new workspace. She began unpacking her supplies while Jiyoon leaned against the desk, lowering her voice. "Listen, there's something you should know. Did you hear about Haeran's return?" Sungmi shook her head, arranging her pencils in their holder. "Haeran used to be the star junior designer here. She left for Paris last year, and now she's back. She'll be working on the same project as you." Jiyoon's expression grew serious. "And she's intense about competition." Before Sungmi could respond, a tall, elegantly dressed woman approached their area. Her perfectly styled hair and immaculate makeup made Sungmi feel underdressed in comparison. "So, you're the new talent everyone's talking about," she said, her smile not reaching her eyes.
I'm Heidi.
"I saw your pieces at the showcase last month." "Thank you for," Sungmi began, but Haeran cut her off. "The traditional elements were interesting, but perhaps a bit basic? We'll see how you handle real design challenges." With that, she turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. Jiyoon rolled her eyes. "Don't let her get to you. She does this to everyone she sees as competition." Throughout the morning, Sungmi tried to focus on learning the studio's systems and procedures, but she could feel Haeran's occasional glances from across the room. During the team meeting, their creative director announced the upcoming project, a collaborative collection for Seoul Fashion Week. Each designer would contribute pieces, with the best designs being selected for the final showcase. "This is your chance to prove yourself," Jiyoon told Sungmi over lunch in the break room. "Haeran might have experience, but you have fresh perspective. Use that." As the days passed, Sungmi threw herself into her work. She stayed late, experimenting with different techniques and materials. Jiyoon often kept her company, offering advice and encouragement. "You have real talent," she said one evening, examining Sungmi's sketches. "But you need to be more confident about it." The pressure mounted as the first design review approached. Sungmi watched Haeran presenting her concepts to the creative director. Bold, sophisticated designs that earned approving nods from the senior staff. When it was Sungmi's turn, she could feel Haeran's critical gaze. Taking a deep breath, Sungmi unveiled her designs. She had pushed herself beyond her comfort zone, combining traditional Korean elements with contemporary street style in unexpected ways. The room fell silent as the creative director examined her work. "This is different," he said finally. "In a good way. Very fresh. Continue developing these concepts." Later that day, Haeran cornered Sungmi in the fabric library. "Enjoying your little moment of success?" Her voice dripped with fake sweetness. "Just remember, this industry chews up and spits out newcomers like you every day." Instead of cowering, Sungmi met her gaze steadily. "Thank you for your concern," she replied calmly. "But I think I'll take my chances." That evening, as Sungmi packed up her things, Jiyoon appeared at her desk. "I saw how you handled Haeran today."
Good job. She grinned.
"You know what? Let's get dinner. You need to hear all the studio gossip if you're going to survive here." Over Korean barbecue and soju, Jiyoon shared stories about the industry, making Sungmi laugh with tales of fashion disasters and diva designers. "The thing is," Jiyoon said, becoming serious, "talent isn't enough in this business. You need allies. And you've got one in me." Sungmi felt tears welling up in her eyes, touched by Ji-yoon's friendship and support. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything." "Don't get sappy on me now," Ji-yoon laughed, pouring them both another drink. "Save that energy for your designs. You're going to need it." Walking home that night, Sungmi felt a new determination. Haeran's intimidation tactics had only strengthened her resolve. She would prove herself, not just to Haerin or the studio, but to herself. She had fought too hard for this opportunity to let anyone discourage her now. Minho sat in his father's expansive office on the top floor of Lee Corporation's headquarters, trying to maintain his composure as Chairman Lee Young-hoon lectured him about his responsibilities. The morning sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, highlighting the growing displeasure on his father's face. "I've heard you've been spending time with some designer," his father said, placing a manila folder on his desk. Inside were photos of Minho and Sungmi at various locations, the fashion event, coffee shops, walking together in Gangnam. "This isn't the time for distractions." Minho stiffened, anger rising at the invasion of privacy. "You had me followed? I had you protected," his father corrected, closing the folder. "The board meeting to discuss your promotion to vice president is in 3 months. You need to focus on proving yourself worthy of the position, not chasing after some struggling artist." "Sungmi is a talented designer at Lee and Park," Minho defended, but his father cut him off with a wave of his hand. "Even worse. Dating someone from the industry creates conflicts of interest. End it now, before it becomes a problem." Chairman Lee's tone made it clear. This wasn't a suggestion. Minho left his father's office with his fists clenched. He spent the rest of the day in meetings, barely registering what was being discussed. That evening, he canceled his dinner plans with Sungmi, sending a brief message about being caught up at work. Over the next few weeks, Minho tried to distance himself from Sungmi. He ignored her messages, made excuses about meetings, and avoided the areas where they usually met. But each time he saw her name on his phone or caught a glimpse of her latest design success in industry news, the wall he was trying to build crumbled a little more. Finally, after 3 weeks of avoiding her, he found himself outside her studio late one evening. Through the glass walls, he could see her working alone at her desk, completely absorbed in her sketches. Without allowing himself to think too much, he entered the building. Sungmi looked up as he approached, her expression a mixture of surprise and hurt. "I thought you were too busy to see me these days," she said quietly, putting down her pencil. "I'm sorry," Minho said, sitting down beside her desk. "I've been dealing with family pressure." "Your father doesn't approve of me," Sungmi stated matter-of-factly. When Minho looked surprised, she added, "I'm not naive, Minho. I know how these things work." He reached for her hand across the desk. "None of that matters to me." "But it should." She pulled her hand away. "I've been thinking about this too. Your father's right. I am a distraction. You're about to become vice president, and I'm just starting my career. The timing is all wrong." "Don't do that," Minho said firmly. "Don't diminish what's between us because of external pressure." Their conversation was interrupted by the cleaning staff entering the studio. Minho helped Sungmi pack up her supplies, and they walked together to a nearby park. The evening air was cool, and the park was nearly empty. "Tell me what you want," Minho said as they sat on a bench. "Not what my father wants, or what you think is best for my career. What do you want?" Sungmi was quiet for a long moment, watching the fountain in front of them. "I want to be with you," she finally admitted. "But I don't want to be the reason you lose everything you've worked for." Instead of responding, Minho kissed her. It was their first kiss, and it carried all the weight of their unspoken feelings and fears. When they finally pulled apart, both knew there was no going back to just being acquaintances. "We'll figure it out," Minho promised, holding her close. Together. But as they parted ways that night, both carried their own burdens of guilt. Minho knew his father wouldn't stop pressuring him, and the board meeting loomed like a dark cloud on the horizon. Sungmi worried about being a liability to Minho's career, even as she fell deeper in love with him. The next few weeks became a delicate balance of secret meetings and public distance. They met in out-of-the-way cafes, took walks in quiet neighborhoods, and shared hurried phone calls between meetings. The pressure of hiding their relationship added both excitement and strain to their connection. The announcement of the Young Designer competition sent ripples through Seoul's fashion community. Held annually, it was known for launching careers and opening doors to international markets. When the notice appeared on Lee and Park's bulletin board, the studio buzzed with excitement. Sungmi stood before her collection in the studio's presentation room, surrounded by swatches of fabric and preliminary sketches. The competition required a complete collection of 15 pieces centered around the theme, traditional futures. As she pinned another sketch to the board, Haerin walked past, pausing to examine her work. "Entering the competition?" Haerin asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "How brave of you, considering your limited experience." Before Sungmi could respond, Jiyoon appeared. "Of course she's entering. The whole studio's talking about her concepts." She turned to Sungmi. "The creative director specifically mentioned your work during the board meeting yesterday."
Haeria smiled thoughtfully.
"Well, I look forward to competing against you. May the best designer win." She walked away, her heels clicking against the floor with determined precision. The pressure of the competition began to wear on Sungmi. She worked late into the night, her desk illuminated by a single lamp while the rest of the studio lay dark and empty. Her phone buzzed frequently with messages from Minho, but she rarely had time to respond properly. Meanwhile, Minho's own life had become increasingly chaotic. His father had intensified the pressure, scheduling him for additional board meetings and client dinners that often ran late into the evening. The few times he managed to see Sungmi, she was distracted and exhausted, her mind clearly on her designs. One evening, after a particularly stressful board meeting, Minho surprised Sungmi at the studio with dinner. "You need to eat," he insisted, setting up the takeout containers on her desk. "I can't," she gestured to the half-finished garment on her mannequin. "The preliminary judging is in 3 days, and this piece isn't working right." 10 minutes, he pleaded. "That's all I'm asking." She finally relented, and they sat together among her sketches and fabric samples. As they ate, Minho noticed the dark circles under her eyes and the way her hands trembled slightly from exhaustion. "I heard about a new project my father's planning," he said, trying to distract her. "He wants to expand into the European market, starting with Paris." Sungmi's chopsticks froze halfway to her mouth. "Paris? That's wonderful for you. It would mean relocating for at least a year," he continued, watching her reaction carefully. The silence that followed felt heavy with unspoken words. Finally, Sungmi stood up, returning to her mannequin. "You should go," she said quietly. "I need to finish this." "Sungmi, we need to talk about this." "What's there to talk about?" She turned to face him, her eyes glistening. "This is your chance to prove yourself to your father. You have to take it. Not if it means losing you." Minho stepped closer, but she backed away. Maybe this is for the best," her voice cracked. "We've been fooling ourselves, thinking we could make this work. You have your path and I have mine. They were never meant to intersect permanently." "You don't mean that." Minho reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "Please just go," she whispered. "I need to focus on the competition. I can't deal with this right now." Minho left the studio that night feeling like something fundamental had shifted between them. The next day, Sungmi didn't answer his calls or messages. She threw herself completely into preparation for the competition, working with a frenzied determination that worried even Jiyoon. The day of the preliminary judging arrived. Sungmi stood before the panel, presenting her collection with practiced composure. Haerin watched from the back of the room, her own presentation already completed. The judges asked detailed questions about Sungmi's techniques and inspiration, their expressions unreadable. That evening, as the studio emptied, Sungmi remained at her desk, staring at her phone. 5 missed calls from Minho. She turned the phone face down and returned to her sketches, ignoring the ache in her chest. Jiyoon found Sungmi in the studio's break room the next morning, staring blankly at an untouched cup of coffee. The preliminary judging results had been announced. Both she and Haerin had made it to the finals, but Sungmi's confidence had been shaken by the judges' critical comments about her technical execution. "Stop overthinking it," Jiyoon said, sliding into the chair across from her.
Jo.
You made it to the finals. That's what matters. They said my construction needs work, Sungmi mumbled. Maybe Haerin was right. Maybe I'm not ready for this. Jiyoon reached across the table and grabbed Sungmi's coffee, taking a deliberate sip. Okay, pity party's over. You're coming with me. She dragged Sungmi to her workspace, where she pulled out a stack of fashion magazines. Look at these. Every successful designer had critics. What matters is how you respond to them. As they flipped through the magazines, Jiyoon pointed out various designers' early works and how they evolved.
See?
Even the great Park Ji-won started somewhere. And now she's interested in your work. Meanwhile, across the city, Minho sat in another tense meeting with his father. The Paris project was moving forward faster than expected, and Chairman Lee was pushing for Minho to leave within the month. Your reluctance concerns me, his father said, studying him carefully. This isn't about that designer girl, is it? Before Minho could respond, his assistant rushed in with urgent news. The company's stocks had taken a sudden dive following rumors of financial misconduct within the senior management. Chairman Lee immediately called an emergency board meeting, leaving Minho alone with his thoughts. Back at the studio, Sungmi was working on refining her designs when Haerin approached her workspace. I heard about you and Minho, she said, examining her manicured nails. Such a shame. But really, what did you expect? Men like him don't end up with women like us. You don't know anything about Minho and me, Sungmi replied, keeping her voice steady. Oh, but I do, Haerin smiled. More than you might think. She pulled out her phone, showing Sungmi a photo of herself with Minho at a corporate event from 2 years ago. We have history. Before Sungmi could process this information, their creative director called everyone for an emergency meeting. The competition's final showcase had been moved up by 2 weeks due to a scheduling conflict with the venue. Panic spread through the studio. 2 weeks less meant countless late nights and impossible deadlines. As everyone rushed to adjust their timelines, Haerin caught Sungmi's eye and smiled smugly. That evening, while working late, Sungmi noticed something odd. She had left her latest sketches on her desk while getting coffee, and when she returned, something seemed different. Looking closer, she realized several key measurements had been subtly altered, changes that would have caused serious problems during production. It was Haerin, Jiyoon said when Sungmi showed her the altered sketches. She did the same thing to me last year. But you can't prove it, and accusing her without proof would only make you look unprofessional. Meanwhile, Minho was dealing with his own crisis. The financial misconduct investigation had revealed irregularities that led directly to several board members, the same ones who would be voting on his promotion. His father was furious, demanding Minho find a way to contain the situation before it escalated. Late that night, Sungmi's phone lit up with a message from Minho. Can we talk? It's important. She stared at the screen for a long moment before replying with a simple, not now.
Deadline.
As she returned to her work, Jiyoon appeared with 2 cups of coffee and a determined expression. I've been thinking, she said, pulling up a chair. We need to protect your designs. I have an idea, but it's a bit unorthodox. 3 weeks before the final showcase, Minho stood outside Sungmi's apartment building in the rain. He had tracked down her address through his corporate connections, a move he knew crossed several boundaries. After 15 minutes of internal debate, he finally pressed her apartment number on the intercom. No response. She's not here, a voice said behind him. He turned to find Jiyoon, holding an umbrella. She practically lives at the studio now, like the rest of us preparing for the showcase. I need to talk to her, Minho said, water dripping from his hair. Jiyoon studied him for a moment. Look, I don't know what happened between you two, but right now she needs to focus. The showcase could make or break her career. I understand that, but do you? Jiyoon interrupted. Because showing up at her apartment like this suggests otherwise. Minho stepped back, realizing how desperate he must appear. Jiyoon's expression softened slightly. Give her space. At least until after the showcase. At the studio, Sungmi was putting the finishing touches on her collection. The past weeks had been a blur of sleepless nights and endless adjustments. She had implemented Ji-yoon's suggestion to protect her designs, keeping duplicate sketches in different locations and photographing her work at various stages. Haerin had been suspiciously quiet lately, focused entirely on her own collection. But her confidence seemed to grow daily, while Sungmi's anxiety increased. The judge's previous comments about technical execution haunted her, making her second-guess every decision. The day before the final presentation, Sungmi stayed at the studio later than usual. Around midnight, she heard movement in Haerin's workspace. Peering around her partition, she saw Haerin photographing something on her phone, not her own designs, but Sungmi's collection. Heart pounding, Sungmi ducked back behind her partition. She waited until Haerin left before examining her pieces, but couldn't find any obvious tampering. The incident left her paranoid and unable to sleep. The morning of the showcase arrived with a heavy tension in the air. The venue, a converted industrial space in Gangnam, buzzed with activity as designers and staff made final preparations. Sungmi's hands shook as she arranged her collection, checking and rechecking every detail. Ji-yoon helped her steam the garments one last time. "Something feels wrong," Sungmi whispered. "The way Haerin's been acting." "Focus on your work," Ji-yoon advised. "That's all you can control right now." The judges began their rounds, starting from the opposite end of the venue. Sungmi watched as they spent considerable time at Haerin's display, nodding appreciatively. When they finally reached her collection, she launched into her prepared presentation, explaining her fusion of traditional elements with modern techniques. The head judge, a renowned fashion critic, examined her signature piece, a modernized hanbok with intricate geometric patterns. His expression remained neutral as he asked detailed questions about her construction methods. Then came the moment that stopped everyone in their tracks. Haerin, who had been hovering nearby, stepped forward with a tablet in her hand. "I feel obligated to bring something to the judge's attention," she announced loudly enough for nearby observers to hear. She pulled up a series of photos on her tablet, designs that looked remarkably similar to Sungmi's collection, but dated 3 months earlier. "These are my original concepts," Haerin declared. "I believe there's been some inappropriate borrowing of ideas." The room fell silent. Sungmi felt the blood drain from her face as the judges huddled around the tablet, comparing the images to her collection. She opened her mouth to defend herself, but no words came out. "This is a serious accusation," the head judge said gravely. "We'll need to investigate this before making our final decision." Sungmi watched helplessly as her dreams seemed to crumble around her. In the crowd of spectators that had gathered, she caught a glimpse of Minho's face. He had come after all. Their eyes met briefly before she turned away, unable to bear as witness to her humiliation. Minho pushed through the crowd gathering around Sungmi's display, his corporate training forgotten as he watched her face crumble under Haerin's accusation. But before he could reach her, security began clearing the area to allow the judges to discuss the situation privately. He found himself in the venue's lobby, mind racing. Something about Haerin's smug confidence bothered him. He'd known her during her previous time at the company, known her tendency to manipulate situations to her advantage. Pulling out his phone, he made a call to his corporate investigation team. "I need everything you can find on Haerin's activities over the past 6 months," he ordered. "Especially any design registrations or submissions. And I need it within the hour." While waiting, he overheard 2 junior designers discussing how Haerin had mysteriously disappeared to Paris the previous year, only to return suddenly with no explanation. This detail nagged at him. It coincided with a major scandal at a French fashion house, where several designers had been accused of stealing designs from emerging artists. His phone buzzed with incoming information. As he read through the documents, his suspicion turned to certainty. Haerin's original concepts had been registered just last week, backdated through some creative paperwork. More importantly, they found evidence linking her to the Paris scandal. She hadn't left Korea in disgrace. She'd fled to avoid being implicated. Minho was about to return to the showcase when another document caught his eye, a money transfer from his father's personal account to Haerin's, dated just after her return to Korea. The pieces suddenly fell into place. His father had hired her to discredit Sungmi, knowing it would destroy both her career and their relationship. Anger coursed through him as he stormed through the venue's back entrance, finding Hae-rin in a private room preparing for the final judging. She looked up, unsurprised to see him. "I wondered when you'd figure it out," she said, closing her tablet. "Your father sends his regards. How much did he pay you?" Min-ho demanded, his voice cold. "Enough to make it worth my while." Hae-rin shrugged. "Nothing personal against Sungmi, of course. Just business." "I have proof," he held up his phone, "of everything. The backdated registrations, the Paris scandal, the payment from my father." For the first time, Hae-rin's confident facade cracked. "You wouldn't dare expose this. It would implicate your father. The scandal would destroy your family's company." "Maybe it needs to be destroyed," Min-ho replied. "At least the corrupt parts of it." "Think about what you're doing," Hae-rin warned. "This isn't just about some designer you're infatuated with. This is your inheritance, your future." Min-ho stepped closer, his voice low but firm. "No, this is about right and wrong. Something my father and you seem to have forgotten exists." He turned to leave, but Hae-rin's next words stopped him. "There's something else you should know," she said. "Something about Sungmi's past that even she doesn't know. Ask her about her mother's connection to Lee Corporation." Min-ho hesitated, thrown by this new information. Before he could respond, a commotion erupted from the main showcase area. He rushed out to find the judges returning to their positions, ready to announce their decision. Looking at Sungmi's pale face as she stood by her collection, Min-ho knew he had to act fast. He had the evidence to clear her name, but using it would expose his father's corruption and potentially destroy his family's company. More troublingly, Hae-rin's cryptic comment about Sungmi's mother suggested there were even deeper secrets waiting to be uncovered. Without hesitation, Min-ho strode to the center of the showcase area. "I apologize for the interruption," he announced, his voice carrying across the venue, "but I have evidence that needs to be considered before any decisions are made." The head judge frowned at the interruption, but Min-ho's position as a prominent industry figure gave him enough authority to command attention. He connected his phone to the venue's projection system, displaying the documentation of Hae-rin's recent design registrations and their backdated paperwork. "As you can see," he continued, "these designs were registered only last week, despite carrying earlier dates. Furthermore," he revealed the connection to the Paris scandal, watching as Hae-rin's face drained of color. The judges huddled together, examining the evidence on their tablets. Whispers spread through the crowd as Hae-rin backed away toward the exit, only to find her path blocked by security personnel who had been quietly summoned. Ji-yoon stepped forward, adding her own testimony. "I have documentation of suspicious activities in the studio," she declared, pulling out her phone, including security footage of Hae-rin accessing Sungmi's workspace after hours. The head judge cleared his throat. "In light of this evidence, we will need to reconvene to discuss the situation. Ms. Hae-rin, please remain available for questioning. Ms. Sungmi, your collection will be given full consideration without the cloud of these accusations." As the crowd dispersed, Chairman Lee burst into the venue, his face contorted with rage. "Min-ho, what do you think you're doing?" "The right thing," Min-ho replied calmly. "For once." His father grabbed his arm, pulling him aside. "You're destroying everything I've built. Everything that would have been yours." "No," Min-ho pulled away. "You did that yourself when you decided to manipulate people's lives for your own benefit." Security approached, respectfully asking Chairman Lee to leave the premises. As he was escorted out, he turned to Min. "Her kindness to a man in need sets off a chain of events. He's a CEO who introduces her to a world of opportunities and perhaps love. And if you cherish your family and love videos like this, subscribe to our channel to have 10 years of luck in your life." The rain pounded against the windows of Seoul's bustling business district as Min-ho rushed into the nearest cafe, his expensive suit already dampened by the downpour. The small coffee shop was packed with others seeking shelter, creating a humid atmosphere of wet clothes and steamy windows. Min-ho checked his watch. He was already running late for his next meeting, but the weather left him with no choice but to wait it out. The line moved slowly as customers ordered their drinks. Minho pulled out his phone, scrolling through emails while he waited. The shop's warm lighting created a cozy atmosphere, contrasting with the gloomy weather outside. When it was finally his turn, he ordered an Americano, his standard choice for stressful workdays. As Minho turned away from the counter with his coffee in hand, someone bumped into his elbow. The hot liquid splashed across his white shirt and onto a woman's cream-colored blouse. The coffee created a growing brown stain across both their clothes. Minho froze, mortified by the accident. "I'm so sorry," he said, reaching for the napkin dispenser. His hands fumbled with the papers, dropping several on the floor. The woman bent down to help him pick them up, and to his surprise, she was laughing. "Don't worry about it," she said, dabbing at her blouse with a napkin. "I was planning to change anyway." Her smile was genuine, lacking the forced politeness he usually encountered in his corporate world. She had an artistic air about her, wearing a loosely fitted blouse tucked into high-waisted pants, with several rings adorning her fingers. Minho grabbed more napkins, still apologizing. "Please, let me pay for your dry cleaning. It's the least I can do." He reached for his wallet, but she waved him off. "Really, it's fine. Sometimes the universe just wants us to slow down, right?" She gestured to the rain outside. "Like today, everyone's rushing around, but the weather's forcing us to take a break." Minho found himself relaxing despite the embarrassing situation. "I suppose you're right, though my next meeting might disagree with that philosophy." You're one of those always busy corporate types," she said, but her tone was teasing rather than judgmental. She pulled a small sketchbook from her bag and began dabbing it dry. Some coffee had splashed onto its pages. "Are you an artist?" Minho asked, noticing the detailed sketches visible on the pages. "Something like that," she replied vaguely, closing the book before he could get a better look.
I'm Seungmi.
"Minho," he responded, surprising himself by not adding his usual title or company name. The rain continued to drum against the windows, creating a peaceful backdrop to their conversation. They found themselves sharing a small table near the window, both waiting for the rain to subside. Seungmi told him about her favorite rainy day activities, sketching in cafes, visiting museums, or simply watching movies at home. Minho shared how he usually worked through weather like this, rarely taking time to appreciate it. "That sounds lonely," she commented, stirring her replacement coffee that Minho had insisted on buying her. The observation caught him off guard. People in his circle rarely spoke so directly about personal matters. Her honesty was refreshing, making him realize how much of his life was spent maintaining appearances. As they talked, Minho found himself drawn to her authentic nature. She laughed freely, spoke her mind, and seemed completely comfortable in her own skin, qualities rarely found in his corporate world of careful words and calculated actions. When she mentioned enjoying art exhibitions, his interest piqued, but she quickly changed the subject, maintaining an air of mystery about her professional life. The rain eventually slowed to a drizzle, and both realized they needed to leave. Minho felt an unexpected reluctance to end their conversation. There was something intriguing about Seungmi, her creative energy, her genuine demeanor, and the way she seemed to live in a completely different world from his own. As they prepared to part ways, Minho watched her gather her things, noting how she carefully protected her sketchbook. He wondered about the drawings inside and what they might reveal about her. The coffee stain on his shirt had long since dried, but he found himself grateful for the accident that led to this unexpected encounter. 2 weeks after the cafe incident, Minho stood in his office overlooking Seoul's skyline, reviewing the final details for an upcoming fashion industry event his company was sponsoring. As the lead coordinator, he needed to ensure everything was perfect: the venue, the guest list, the presentations. His mind kept drifting back to the creative woman from the cafe, and an idea began to form. After several attempts, he managed to track down Seungmi through the cafe's regular customers. Making a bold decision, he visited during her usual sketching time. She looked up from her sketchbook, surprised to see him again. "I have a proposition for you," Minho said, sitting down across from her. "My company is hosting a major fashion event next week. Given your artistic background, I thought you might be interested in attending." Sungmi's expression shifted, a mix of excitement and hesitation crossing her face. She closed her sketchbook carefully, buying time before responding. What kind of event is it? It's in Showcase for emerging designers. Several major fashion houses will be there, along with industry critics and potential investors. Minho watched her reaction carefully. I noticed your sketches last time. They looked like fashion designs. Sungmi bit her lip, considering his words. They are, she admitted finally. I'm trying to break into the industry, but it's complicated. This could be your opportunity. Minho pressed, sliding the invitation across the